Welcome! In this video, you are going to learn how to properly contribute to the Godot code reference. More than that, you are going to see the pull request workflow that most free and open source software projects use. You will learn to fork a repository, to clone it to your local computer, make changes, open a pull request, and follow the review process. You will see that once you learn to do that with one project, you can pretty much follow the same steps with, well, almost every project. It's not true to say that everything uses it. You will learn how to write a good reference, how to do proper technical writing. We'll share my experience with that, starting with an overview of the process, of the steps. Then you can find links in the description to jump to what you want to learn. If you already know how to create pull requests, you can skip ahead to just the technical writing part and the best practices. If you want to contribute, there are some prerequisites. You need at least a little bit of understanding of programming, as in order to contribute to the class reference, you will sometimes need to look at the source code of Godot, which is quite accessible. It's not as complicated as you might think. Even if you don't code in C++, you can still read the code and understand some of what it does. But even if you can't do that, you will at least need to test the functions in GDScript to make sure that you understand what they are doing, and so that you can write precise docs for other developers to use. Without further ado, let's get started. Let us start with an overview of the workflow so you know what you are in for. So first of all, you can find the built-in class reference in two places. Inside of Godot, you have the built-in search help that you can access with the F4 key. You can find all the documentation and open it in the script editor. And then you can also find it on the official manual that you can download for offline viewing. At the bottom, you have the class reference. And you can also browse it online, of course. But as a result, even though you can find these pages on the docs, they are actually generated from Godot's source code. So what you want to do is to fork the repository and to edit the XML files that you will find inside of the doc folder, classes subfolder. So you have a number of XML files that you want to open in your text editor, and this is where you edit the class reference. So let me run you through the steps super quick before we cover each of them in greater details. First, you want to head to the Godot repository and create a fork on your GitHub account. I've done that already, and from there you will create a clone, a local copy of your fork that you can edit on your computer, giving you a folder like that contains the entire Godot engine. You'll need to set it up so that you have the copy, your fork, that you can edit, but that you can also pull the changes from upstream from the original Godot engine, so that you can update your local copy and your fork of the engine, like so. From there, to coordinate our work without cluttering the official issues and the official repository, we have a document that we can edit to let other docs contributors know which classes someone is working on. For example, I've reserved all the animation node classes. You don't want to create issues on the official repository because there are already lots of them and lots of people writing things and kind of forgetting about them. So we don't want to clutter it more. And working amongst ourselves on the documentation allows us to coordinate the work more efficiently. So from there, you'll want to head to the doc folder in your local copy of the Godot engine and find the XML file that corresponds to the class that you want to edit. You can then open it in your text editor. So I have animation node add2 open there, and make your changes, but you'll want to create a branch to keep every single project that you do on the docs organized. This is a very common thing when you develop in a team or on free and open source projects. I can do that from my text editor, so I've done so for the animation nodes that I'm working on. I've already made some changes, so you'll fill in between the tags, the XML tags, all the documentation, the reference that will end up in the Godot documentation. I highly suggest that you read complete documented classes to see how other people have written the docs, the written style, and we'll talk more about how to write great changes and great reference. From there, you'll want to create a commit for your changes. So I'm still looking at the git commit from my text editor, and you want to push it to your fork. GitHub is pretty smart. From there, it will offer you to easily create a pull request from the new branch that you created. So when you do that, it will directly open a pull request on the Godot repository, the official one, with your commit's name as the title, and it will add all of your changes, a single class here. But you can then create a pull request. So you'll want to request review from the documentation team and then follow guidelines. Some people might ask for changes if you made some typos or whatever can happen. We need to review each other's work to make the reference as good as can be. So if you forgot a little something or made a small mistake, we'll ask you to make a change, which you can make inside of your file. You can then update your commit, force push to your branch, and it will automatically update your pull request. So you just want to ask the documentation team to review your work. And we'll also make sure to add the documentation label for you so that it's easy for other people contributing to Godot to know that your PR, your pull request, has to do with documentation. From there, someone will merge your work once it's ready, and it will end up in Godot, and you'll become a contributor. This can seem a bit tedious, but the reason we're doing that is we're hundreds, literally 900 people working on the engine, so we have to keep the work really organized, and this workflow is really good for that. It helps to keep the quality of the docs and of the code really high up and to keep the project accessible so that more contributors can join in moving forward. We're going to start by forking the Godot repository, creating a copy of it on our GitHub account that's separate and that we can manipulate however we want before we submit our changes to the Godot engine. On GitHub, being logged in, you want to click on the fork button in the top right. I've already forked Godot as part of GDQuest, but you will have the option to choose on which account or organization you want to fork it. I'm going to head to the one I've created. So it should open a new page in your account or organization. You'll have your name in the top left corner, /Godot, fork from the source project. Now we want to clone that repository, so we want to get a copy of it on our computer. For that, go to clone or download, and you want to copy the link that you get here to clone from the command line. By default, you should see the HTTPS link. I'm using SSH, another way to download it where I don't have to enter my password on the computer. So I'm going to head to that temporary folder and open my terminal. Then you want to do git clone followed by the link to your copy of the Godot game engine. So gdquest/godot.git, and it's going to download all the files and the entire history of the project. Now I'm going to skip ahead. Once the download is done, you can then find the entire Godot engine on your computer. Now I want to do a little more than what we have here. So I'll enter the Godot directory like so on the command line. See, your cloned repository is not Godot itself, it's a fork of it. It's a copy of the project that you can manipulate. Now we do want a reference to the original project, Godot engine/Godot, so that we can pull the latest changes that the other 900 contributors made to it, and that we can base our work on the latest changes of other developers. The same thing on Godot engine/Godot on the source repository. Copy the link to the repository, and we're going to add a remote. What Git calls a remote, that is a reference to an online server where you have a copy of that Git repository. To do that, you're going to type git remote. If you press enter at this point, you will see you have one called origin, and origin is your fork. It's the place somewhere on GitHub server where you have your copy of the Godot engine. To add a new remote, you want to do git remote add, and then you're going to name it. We can name it upstream to suggest that this is the source of the project, of this free and open source software, and you then paste the link to it. Press enter to add the remote, and now when you type git remote, you will see that you have two, origin and upstream. We freshly cloned the repository, so we don't have new changes to pull, but anytime you can then use upstream as a reference, as an identifier for the source repo. So git pull upstream, and when you do so, when you don't use just git pull, you have to specify the branch that you want to pull. In general, you will pull from the master branch, the latest changes in the Godot game engine. To do that, to anytime be able to pull the new changes made to the docs, made to the C++ files, and then you want to push these new changes as well from time to time to your fork. To do that, you just do git push, and that should do the trick. Once you've done that, you want to use the docs tool in Godot, the doc status tool. So in the Godot engine, in the doc folder, you'll find a tools subfolder. In there, you have docstatus.py, a program that you can use to check which parts of the docs are complete and which are not. So open it in your command line, and I'm going to expand the window. So you want to call it with Python 3, then call the script docstatus.py, and the tool, if you just run it like that, it's going to give you the help. You will see the various flags. Now you need to pass it the folder that contains the classes, and if you do so, press enter, you will get a large table that's going to show you the status of the docs. If I go back to the top, you will see the overall completion percentage for each class file, and you will see if it's missing the brief description, some methods, constants, members, etc. Now you have quite a lot of classes in Godot, so if you just want to work on those that are not complete, you can use the same command with the -b option, and you will see that there are still 300 classes that are not 100% complete, but then it already filters the list down a lot, that you can focus on things that you can complete. The doc status is based on that classes folder and the content of the XML files, so that is why you want to pull the latest changes from upstream from time to time, so that these files, these XML files, become up to date, and so that the doc status is accurate. Time to get started writing the docs. Here I am in the Godot folder, the Godot project source code, and here's the same thing in Emacs, my text editor. I'm going to go down the doc and classes folder to start editing the class and pick one of them. I want to talk about how to get started writing the docs. So I've written a few for the animation node classes today, and here's an example of one that's a bit tricky to do. You have the animation node animation. Well, the first thing you want to check is how these things work in the Godot editor, right? And in the case of the animation node classes, they correspond to the nodes that you use inside an animation tree for 2D and 3D animation graphs. If you check the label at the top of each of these cells, or the add node menu, you can notice that the names correspond to the end of the name of the class, what's after animation node. Add 2, add 3, animation, blend 2, etc. So if I go to the add node menu, you will find the same there. So this tells you that these classes here correspond to these nodes in the animation tree. So you want to play a bit with them and try to understand how they work. This will help you write a description for them. For example, animation node animation, I had to check in the editor what it does, and it's just a reference to an animation that you can name using a label. And then you can put it inside of the input slots of any other node that is going to blend animations together. So this helped me write the base description of my animation node animation. Another thing that helped me is because I can see that animation node animation inherits from animation root node. I could go to that class and read about it. So animation, let me find root node. Although it's incomplete here, but it inherits from animation node, this one. And so I use what I found in animation node to get a sense for what all the derived classes were. That's the first thing you want to do. Use the tool in Godot in the editor. The second thing that you want to do, I'm going to close that, is to then use the node or the element you want to document from the code. Let us say I want to work on something we have used, most of us, like Area 2D here. So I'm going to open it. You want to go to the editor. Say I want to document, there's one called get overlapping areas. It's already documented here. I'm going to increase the font size. Let's say it was not documented. Well, one thing you can do is open a project, and here I have my snap detector that extends Area 2D. So you create a node that's going to derive from the class that you want to document, and you use the method that you want to document. Okay, and you check how it works. You run a few tests through GDScript, through your code. This is a great exercise to train in Godot, and at the same time it allows you to write some documentation. So that's the second thing. If with these two methods you can't document precisely enough the method or property that you are trying to write about, you can skip it, or if you feel like it, you can go check the source code. This is a little trickier, but this is the next step if the other two methods are not enough. So say I want to document this class here, animation node state machine playback. Well, I want to find it in the Godot source code. The best way to do that is to use some tags database, which I have here in this editor. I can do that, automatically index a project source code and grab all of the classes, the methods, etc. that it contains. So here I'm on the documentation, but the class's name in C++ is the name that I have highlighted here in the editor, right? So I want to find it in the source code. I'm going to highlight it, and in my editor, Spacemax, I can do space PJ to search for tags, find tag in the project. And it's going to give me what's highlighted, what I've selected now. So I'll press enter, and this will take me to where the class animation node state machine playback, what a mouthful, is created, is declared. And from there, I can read about its properties, and I can try to find some more information about it. By default, in Spacemax at least, it will take you to the .h, the header file. And you want to go to the .cpp file to find more information about how the methods of the class work, because the header file is just going to define the structure of the class, but the actual mechanics of the code are in the C++ file. So here, if I go back to the top, I can find my animation nodes state machine playback. So I'll go back to my C++ file, and then you want to search your file, because these are pretty big. Even if I collapse all the blocks here, you can see that this one is pretty massive. So I'm going to do one of a few things in Spacemax. I can use space JI to jump to the, that was machine, and I'll search for playback. And if I enter these patterns, it's going to give me a list of methods of the class that belong to state machine playback, animation node state machine playback. And from there, I can check whatever I wanted to document, get travel path, for example, jump to it, expand it, and see that it just returns the path property. So you can read the docs like that, slowly and steady. And from there, use that to write the documentation. So I'm going to go back to node state machine here, state machine playback. There you go. But if you're trying to understand, for example, get travel path, it doesn't have a description, returns the, let's see if there's a path property in here. There was a travel one, returns the path, state machine is traversing C, for example. I could reference the travel method. This is really an example. I'm going to reference method. Is it a method or a property? There was a property called travel method. So method travel in brackets. This is going to create a link to that other method in the editor, so you can click it and jump instantly to the method in question. So that's how to technically find the information you need to write the docs. Here I am in another class to talk a bit about the writing style. We have lots of people in the Godot community, and a lot of us are not native English speakers. So we want to make the documentation, for one, precise, of course, but also as accessible as possible, without compromising on the precision. And to do that, we've written a few writing guidelines, and that multiple members of the community, native speakers, technical writers have contributed to. Try to write clear, simple, efficient English in the docs. These are guidelines, right? These are not absolute rules that you have to enforce in every sentence, but the idea is, here's a few things we can keep in mind to try to simplify our English. One of them, the first one, is using the direct voice, action verbs whenever you can. So these are things, for example, the class, the animation node blend space 1D, I start sentences with action verbs like outputs, or it does something, right? You have methods, you want to use action verb like the method add blend point. It adds a new point on the axis of the blend node 1D, the one that you can find in the editor. If a method is a getter and it just returns a value, then we start with the word returns. It returns some piece of information, what you have with the return keyword in GDScript. So there's that. Use precise action verbs, avoid using the transitive state, I think that is, verbs ending in ing, because they tend to make the sentences a bit longer and heavier unnecessarily, right? Same thing with adding adverbs and adjectives, things like basically, eventually, those kinds of things. They don't add any information to the sentence. Actually, your words will have a bit more impact if your sentences stay concise. It saves reading time if you add up all the adverbs that we don't need in the docs, and it makes them a bit more formal as well. Some words are banned, saying that things are simple, easy, those kinds of things, because they really don't help. Programming is not easy in any case. They don't add any valuable information to the documentation. This is true of the code reference and of the manual as well. And I will let you read the rest. It's not very long, and there are examples as well for each guideline that we added in there. So go check it out. You'll find the link in the description, and use these to write your docs. I also highly recommend that you start by reading classes that have been worked out a lot and fixed a lot to get a sense for how the docs are written. This is the case of Area 2D. I can recommend something like A Star. I think it was pretty clean. Actually, maybe I'm the one who wrote it. I don't remember. You can find Kinematic Body 2D, those kinds of things. So these classes have been read again and again, and so people have had the opportunity to collectively fix the typos and those kinds of things in them. So there are good examples of how to write code. You can see that we have some elements in brackets in the documentation. These brackets allow you to add BB code. You can use, let me increase the font size again. So you can use BB codes like B to bold and I to add italic, although we tend to avoid these. We don't have strict rules for styling these, but we don't use bold too much. However, you have some specific cases. If you put the name of a class, the name of a file here without the .xml inside Angular bracket, this is going to create a direct link to that file in the editor and in the online doc. You can see that you have the method keyword as well that you can put before the name of a method. This will create a link to the corresponding method inside of this file. The method move and slide. There you go. You can use that as well when you use the method keyword in Angular brackets. You can do the name of the class dot a method. This is going to create a link to a method on another class. Instead of the method keyword, you can also use the member keyword. You can find this one down here, member auto advance. It's going to create a link to a property or a member variable inside of that file. And you can also do the same with the class name and the dot. You can type class name dot the member name, and this will create a link to that class's file and to the member variable that corresponds to it. Let's talk about how to submit your changes to the Godot project. I just wrote this class, the Bone2D1. We're going to start from the Godot folder where you cloned your repository. Let's open the terminal, and I'm going to make it full screen here. We want to first make sure that we're not on the master branch. If I run the command git diff, I can see a comparison of the initial state of the project, of the repository, and the differences I brought, the changes I brought. In green, you have the lines I've added. I have my changes. I have not committed them. I have not staged them even. If I run git status, you can see that I've modified the document, but I don't want to store that modification on the master branch. So I'm going to use git branch to create a new branch, and I'm going to name it bone docs bone2d. There you go. I've created a branch, but I'm still on the master branch. I'm still not going to store my changes in the right location if I do it now. You want to switch the branch of the git tree you are on. Git checkout to do that. That's the command. You want to give the name of the branch. So doc bone2d. When I do that, you can see now my command line tells us I'm on the doc bone2d branch. From there, I haven't done anything to my changes. If I run git status, you can see that I still have that file modified here. So you want to commit that change to the git history. This is a way of saying I'm sure that we want these changes, I'm saving them, right? And before you can do that, you have to stage them. You have to tell Git, as part of this commit, as part of this chunk of the project's history, I want to add these specific changes. Here I only have one file I modified, but when you work on a large project, you may modify many files, and you may want to commit that in separate chunks that are files that are related to one another, or changes that are related to one another. To stage the files, we can commit it to the history. You want to use the git add command. You can use the star to add everything you've changed, but in the case of our change, I want to instead add the specific file path here. So my command prompt, if I just type start of the path that I have above here on the git status and press tab, it's going to complete the path for me. But otherwise, you can type the entire path like that and you press enter. Then if you run the git status command again, you're going to see now our change is in green. It means if we run the git commit command, this file will be stored in the history, in our change. So that is what we're going to do next. Git commit, and you can then press enter. It will open a text editor where you can write your commit message. In general, it will open VI in lots of commands. So if you've never used that, instead, you may want to type -m and followed by a message. So -m is the option to follow by the commit message. The first line is going to appear to everyone in the Git history when you run the git log command. So when you see below the author and the date in the Git history log, the line that you see here after the merge one, that might be there as well, where the title that you see there is the first line of your message. And this one is very important because in a large project like Godot, from time to time you need to go back in the history to see who did what change and why, why they changed the code or the documentation a certain way. There might be explanations in the commit to understand why certain decisions were made in the past. In this one, I'm going to say add documentation for Bone 2D. It's descriptive, it's simple. Now, if I have more to add, I can jump one line and keep writing information for the readers. But in this case, we do not really. Just add documentation for, and then you write the name of the class you changed. To me, it works really well. Press enter to commit the change, and so it's going to create a new commit. Now you can type git status again. It can tell you don't have anything left to commit, but now our change is here on our local computer, but it's not on our server. So from there, we want to write git push, and then we'll do origin followed by the name of the branch. So doc Bone 2D. Okay, so that way we precisely push the change to the same name branch on our fork of the Godot game engine. This branch is going to be created by GitHub for us. So press enter. It will upload everything, and from there we have to keep going with a navigator. So I'm going to go to github/gdquest/the Godot engine, just Godot. So there, GitHub will tell you that you can compare your changes, the branch that you uploaded, and create a pull request. If you click that button, it will create a request to add your changes to the Godot engine's master branch, so the development version Godot, the engine itself. You can see that the source of the change is your fork, gdquest/Godot, and that it's going to compare against Bone 2D here. So it's going to compare the new changes that you've added to it, right? This is the same as going to the source repository, going to the pull request section, creating a new pull request, and setting it up manually. Okay, which is a bit more complicated. So GitHub makes it a lot easier. There you will have your commit title as the title of the pull request, and you will have a message here if you added some more lines to your commit message. You can leave a comment for the people who are going to review your changes. So from there, you want to ask the documentation team to review your change. So in the reviewers, you click and you check for the documentation. You ask them to review your changes. The other things I can change because I'm a reviewer on the Godot repository, so I'm going to add the documentation label. You won't be able to do that directly, but someone from the docs team or someone from the Godot review team will do it for you. And from there, if everything is ready, you want to click Create Pull Request. Try to ensure that you have only one commit. Now, you want to follow the review process. So from there, other people are going to come to these changes, read them, and give you some comments. They might ask you to make some changes. If that is the case, here is how you do so. I got some review on the animation node class, and now I have to fix a few things. So let's see how to do that. For each of the comments that you are going to get, you are going to see the file in which the comment is. You're going to see the line that gets commented on, the line that you change, so you can jump to the line number in the file, and a comment that tells you what to do, what you should change, or you will have some discussion with the reviewer, those kinds of things. So I had a few changes to make over the 8 files. So I went back to my text editor and I changed the files. You can see that to the yellow line on the side. Now I can show you the changes in my text editor. For example, for this file, you can see how I modified some of the lines to add some information, to fix some typos, to add some links here. And I've saved all the files, so I've made all the changes one by one. I use the line numbers you can see on the left to find what the person talked about. But also sometimes if I have, for example, I had an issue in multiple files at once. So there was that command that the range should be in code, BB code, like that, because as we use the brackets to create links and all those kinds of things in the docs, the parser, the program that converts these XML files into docs, might have trouble. So I had 4 files that use the same pattern. In this case, I use a global search and replace to fix the files. So in my text editor, it's very good. I can search in a folder like that, and so I can start to type a regex pattern like so, and from there I can take all these to a separate file. So I'll press Ctrl-Z F4 here, and here I am in a new file where I can modify each of the lines. I can use a search and replace and commit these changes to the files directly. That's how I modified them all at once. So if you have the same change in several files, I recommend that you use a process like this. Now it's time to upload the changes. So I'm in the command line. I'm going to show you how to do it with Git from the command line, although I normally use my text editor. Here, I use this tool to commit everything. So I'm using the Emacs text editor. This tool in particular, you can find an excellent intro tutorial by Jarl Ya. You can see the link on screen. But to make it so all of you can follow along, let's use the command line. So to start, we want to make sure that we are back to the branch we were working on for that PR. If not, you want to use git checkout and go to the corresponding branch. So doc, animation nodes, we're already on it, right? Git status to see the changes, and git add to stage them, so to prepare them for the commit. I'm going to stage everything here because I want to update all these classes at once. So now if I do git status, you're going to see in green that they are all staged. They are ready to be added to my previous commit, because I don't want to create a new commit for that. I want to add these changes back to my commit so that the Godot commit history stays as clean as possible. We'll just push one commit. You want to do git commit amend, like so, to modify your last commit. So if I use git log to get a log of the recent history of the project. The latest one here on the doc animation nodes is my commit. Add the documentation for animation node resources. When you use git commit -- amend, it's going to edit the most recent one, the one the head is on here by default. So git commit amend. I'm going to press enter. It will open the default text editor that you're using for Git. In my case, it's Emacs here. It will open that window with magit at the bottom, or magit, where I can see all the new changes, all the changes in this PR. And so I can then press Control-C, Control-C to commit the change. Okay, and going back now to the command line, you can see that the files have been updated properly. So from there, I want to push the changes to my fork, to my repository, not try to push it to the Godot engine directly, but to the origin remote. I'll do git push, and I'm going to do, here I could do origin doc animation nodes, like so. And if you try to do that by default, Git will reject that. It will say, no, it's not possible. See? Rejected. The reason is we modified the history of the project. If we were to push it straight, we would overwrite the changes on the server, the original commit. And by default, Git doesn't allow that. That is why we have to use the -f argument on the command. I'm going to do git push origin doc animation nodes -f. And just to explain, origin is the name of the remote you're pushing to, and you're pushing to a specific branch. Note that in that case, if you just use git push -f, it would also works. It's implicit that this is the server and the branch that you are pushing to. But if you do that, -f, it's going this time to overwrite the changes. Once it's been done, you can go back to your PR and automatically Git will show a new line saying that there have been some changes pushed there. From there, you can reload the page to see the little outdated tag on every line that you've modified, right? And from that, the reviewers should be notified, but you can also add a new comment, just fix. And there you go. So you do that every time a reviewer asks you to make some changes, and once everything is done, once you've fixed everything, someone will merge it in the Godot game engine for you. That's it for this video. So now you can get started contributing, and don't forget that you can join the IRC channel for the documentation team or the Discord server where you can communicate with fellow contributors if you are struggling with something. We always help one another among contributors, and yeah, we kind of have to, because it can be a bit complicated to do our work sometimes. Now, you can find links in the video description for the text version of this tutorial and to get started contributing. So you will find the link to the documentation issues on the Godot repository, but also to the related documentation. I'm making this tutorial as part of the 2019 Doc Sprint event for Godot 3.2. I invite you to join us with that, or for future events to keep improving the manual, the learning resources that are available with Godot, and the built-in code reference. Thank you kindly for watching. Be creative, have fun. Let's see one another in the next one. Bye-bye.